Well, let me ask you about that, Congressman, this idea of making the tax cuts permanent. One of your comments in opposition to the bill, you said the American people did not vote for more deficits, more stimulus, or more uncertainty in the tax code. You talked about the uncertainty, but if you were to make the tax cuts permanent, you're talking about adding $3 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. Just extending them for the next 2 years adds almost $500 billion. So how can you say the American people didn't vote for deficits when at the same time your plan would add almost $3 trillion to the deficit?
Yeah, I've heard that analysis for years. I know in Washington, D.C., the budget numbers crunchers here tend to think that when they don't take money from the American people, there's a cost that they ought to round. I still think John F. Kennedy was right that when you embrace pro-growth tax policies, that a rising tide will lift all boats. That means that individuals will have more of their dollars to spend. It also means with a growing economy, I think those predictions are wrong. I think as the economy expands, even revenues to the federal government will expand.
But it hasn't worked for the last few years.
We're never going to balance the budget, John. John, we're never going to balance the budget unless we get this economy growing again, and temporary, targeted tax relief is not a foundation for economic growth.
But can you say, though, that the tax cuts over the last few years have not added to the deficit? That there has been a rising tide that lifts all boats?
Look, I think there's been a lot of errors in the last few years. You know, I opposed the Wall Street bailout. I fought against runaway spending when Republicans were under control. But I think on November the 2nd, the American people sent a deafening message to Washington, D.C., that they want to change the way this town does business. And I can't help but feel, and again, this is a tough call. I'm not casting judgment on anyone on our side of the aisle who decides to take a yes vote on this. I just think the American people look at this deal and say, we can do better. Why don't you people stick around and figure out how to get this thing done in a way that will really create jobs and be fiscally responsible?